Think your morning routine is rough? You wouldn't survive breakfast in ancient Greece. You're about to see exactly why the birthplace of democracy would chew you up and spit you out faster than you can say philosophy. We're talking 24 hours in Athens around 400 BC. And spoiler alert, the place that gave us the Olympics also gave people reasons to pray for death. We'll cover your dawn wake-up call that involves urine and screaming, a breakfast that'll make you miss gas station food, a trip to the bathroom that redefines the word public, and by the end, you'll understand one simple truth. Every marble statue you've seen is a lie designed to hide the absolute chaos underneath. And here's the thing nobody mentions in history class. That final hour before sunset? That's when things get truly medieval. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The sun hasn't even risen and you're already in trouble. 5 a.m. No alarm clock, just the sound of your neighbor emptying their chamber pot directly into the street below your window. Welcome to ancient Athens, where "watch out below" wasn't a suggestion, it was a lifestyle. Your eyes open in a room that makes a storage unit look spacious. You're on a raised wooden platform covered with a thin wool blanket that smells like it was washed during the Persian Wars. The first ones. The room is maybe 8 feet by 8 feet, shared with your entire family, and the temperature is already climbing toward what modern people would call dangerously hot. Here's what movies don't show. That white marble you picture didn't exist in homes. Peasant houses were mud brick covered in rough plaster, packed so tight in neighborhoods that you could literally reach out your window and touch your neighbor's wall. Privacy wasn't a concept. It was a fantasy rich people told themselves they had. Stand up. Immediately regret it. That bed has given you the posture of a question mark. The floor is packed dirt mixed with crushed pottery. No wood floors, no tiles, just earth that's been walked on so many times it's turned into concrete. During summer, families would sprinkle water on it to keep the dust down. During winter, it turned into cold mud that seeped through everything. Your morning hygiene routine? Adorable that you think you'll have one. There's no running water in your house. Zero. The public fountain is 3 blocks away, and the line starts forming at 4 a.m. because everyone needs water for the entire day. Women and slaves do the water carrying. Clay jugs that held about 5 gallons and weighed roughly 40 pounds when full. You'd make that trip 3 or 4 times daily. Washing your face means dipping your hands in yesterday's leftover water, the same water used for cooking, cleaning, and occasionally emergencies. One study of ancient Greek pottery found residue showing the same vessel was used for wine, olive oil, and human waste removal. Not at the same time, we hope, but the bar was low. Brushing your teeth? The Greeks used crushed pumice stone mixed with vinegar. Yes, the same stuff you use to smooth your feet, except you're grinding it against your enamel. Some forward-thinking individuals used urine as mouthwash because the ammonia supposedly whitened teeth. Did it work? Sure. Did it also destroy your mouth's natural bacteria and probably give you infections? Absolutely. But hey, at least your breath smelled like a public bathroom. The morning bathroom situation deserves its own horror movie. Chamber pots were standard issue for nighttime emergencies, but here's where it gets fun. There's no sewage system in most of Athens. None. What's in that pot either gets dumped in the street or, if you're feeling fancy, carried to a communal cesspit at the edge of the neighborhood. These cesspits were exactly what they sound like. Giant holes in the ground where the entire community dumped their waste. They were supposed to be emptied regularly. They weren't. Ancient sources mention cesspits that hadn't been cleared in years, creating mountains of compressed human waste that could be smelled from blocks away. One account describes a drunk man falling into a cesspit at night and drowning before anyone noticed. The city didn't find him for 3 days because, and I quote, "the smell was normal for that area." Public bathrooms existed, but using one was a social event you might want to skip. The public latrine was a stone bench with holes cut in it, positioned in a U shape so you'd be sitting shoulder to shoulder with strangers. No stalls, no dividers, just you and a dozen other Athenians discussing politics while conducting very personal business. The holes emptied into a channel underneath that supposedly flushed with running water. Supposedly. In reality, the water flow was so weak that waste would pile up, creating a methane-filled nightmare that occasionally ignited from torchlight. Toilet paper? Please. You used a sponge on a stick called a tersorium, shared by everyone. After use, it got swished in a bucket of salt water or vinegar. Not cleaned, not replaced, just swished and put back. If you got to the latrine and all the sponges were being used, you waited, or improvised with your hand and hoped you remembered which hand you ate with. Some entrepreneurial types collected urine from public urinals to sell to tanners and launderers. It was called chamber lye, and it was the ammonia cleaner of the ancient world. Every time you peed in public, someone might scoop it up and use it to clean their togas. The circle of life, Greek edition. But you can't think about any of this because hunger is clawing at your stomach. Breakfast in ancient Athens wasn't a meal, it was a test of your gag reflex. If you're lucky, and I mean really lucky, you get barley bread dipped in wine. The bread is the color of dirt because it's made from barley flour, mixed with whatever filler kept costs down, ground chickpeas, lentils, or, during bad harvests, sawdust. Yes, sawdust. The texture is somewhere between a hockey puck and a roof shingle. You don't bite this bread. You don't chew it. You soften it in liquid first, or risk losing teeth. Archaeological analysis of ancient Greek teeth shows wear patterns consistent with eating essentially sandpaper on a daily basis. Most people over 30 had ground their molars down to nubs. The wine you dipping it in? Not the sophisticated thing you're imagining. It's so acidic and concentrated that drinking it straight would strip the enamel off your teeth. Greeks always cut it with water, sometimes 5 parts water to 1 part wine, and even then, it tasted like vinegar mixed with old fruit. But this is the fancy breakfast. Most people ate maza, basically barley porridge that had the consistency of wet cement and the flavor of regret. You scooped it with your hands because forks hadn't been invented yet, and the Greeks thought using multiple utensils was barbaric anyway. 1 utensil, 2 hands, embrace the chaos. Want some protein with that? Hope you like dried fish. Wealthy Athenians ate fresh fish. You are not wealthy. You get dried fish that's been hanging in the sun for weeks, covered in flies, encrusted with salt that hasn't fully dissolved. The smell alone could wake the dead. Eating it required soaking it in water overnight to make it semi-edible, and even then, it had the texture of leather and tasted like the ocean's revenge. One Greek comic playwright wrote that dried fish was food that even the dogs consult each other before eating. That's not exaggeration, that's documentary evidence. If you're really blessed, maybe you get some olives. But these aren't the nice, pitted ones from your local grocery store. These are tiny, bitter, and so salty they'll suck the moisture from your mouth like a Saharan wind. You eat 5 and suddenly you're desperately thirsty. Which brings us back to the water problem. That fountain is still 3 blocks away and the line is even longer now. Cheese? Sure, if you enjoy dairy products with the consistency of rubber and the tang of something that's been sitting in a hot room for multiple days. Greek cheese was made from sheep or goat milk, stored in clay pots sealed with olive oil and kept until needed. Sometimes, until needed meant until someone gets desperate enough to ignore the mold. You force down breakfast, and now comes the hard part, actually living through the day. 7 a.m., time for work. And by work, I mean the kind of labor that would get modern jobs shut down for safety violations within minutes. Most Athenian men worked in agriculture, crafts, or trade. Let's say you're a potter, which sounds artistic until you realize it means sitting in a cramped workshop breathing clay dust and kiln smoke for 12 hours straight. The kiln burns at over 1,000 degrees Celsius, and it's summer in Greece. You're working in temperatures that would make a sauna jealous. Studies of ancient Greek skeletal remains show that craftsmen developed chronic respiratory diseases by their 30s. Potter's lung wasn't just a saying, it was a death sentence delivered in installments. The tools are all handmade, and none of them are standardized. That knife you're using to trim clay? It's literally a sharpened rock tied to a stick. The wheel you're throwing pots on is turned by your own foot on a kick wheel, meaning every single pot requires the leg strength of a Tour de France cyclist. Work breaks? Adorable. You work until the job is done or until you physically collapse. The workshop has no ventilation except one door and maybe a window hole. Not a window with glass, just a hole. When the kiln is firing, the smoke has nowhere to go except your lungs. One account mentions a potter who went blind from kiln smoke by age 35. This wasn't considered a tragedy, it was considered normal. And remember that breakfast? It's supposed to fuel you until dinner. That's right, 2 meals a day maximum. Lunch wasn't a thing for working people. You ate in the morning, worked until evening, ate again, collapsed. Repeat until death, which statistically happened around age 45 if you were lucky. The heat is escalating and there's no escape. By 10 a.m., the temperature is pushing 95 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade. Except there is no shade. The streets are narrow, but they're not covered, and that famous Mediterranean sun is beating down like it has a personal grudge against your skin. You're wearing a chiton, basically a rectangle of cloth pinned at the shoulders and belted at the waist. It's made from undyed wool or linen, which means it's the color of oatmeal and about as fashionable. The rich dye their clothes, but dyes are expensive. Tyrian purple cost more per ounce than gold. You're wearing beige, and you'll stay wearing beige. The wool chiton in summer heat is like wrapping yourself in a blanket and running a marathon. Linen is slightly better, but still absorbs sweat like a sponge and never fully dries. By midday, you're essentially wearing a wet towel that weighs 10 pounds and chafes everything. Shoes are sandals, leather straps that tie around your foot and ankle. No arch support, no cushioning, just leather and hope. The streets are made of stone worn smooth by thousands of feet, which means they're slippery when wet and scorching hot when dry. Walk on them barefoot and you'll cook the soles of your feet medium rare. Every step on these streets is a hazard course. Remember those chamber pots getting dumped out windows? That waste is still there, baking in the sun, creating a smell that would make a modern sewage treatment plant seem like a flower garden. The streets slope toward the center to create natural drainage, which means everything: waste, garbage, dead animals, random liquids you don't want to identify, flows downhill and pools in the middle. Walking requires constant vigilance. Look up to avoid chamber pots. Look down to avoid stepping in the river of mystery fluids. Look ahead to avoid carts, animals, and people who have absolutely no concept of personal space. The city itself is packed tighter than a modern nightclub. Athens at its peak had around 300,000 people crammed into roughly 1.5 square miles. That's about 200,000 people per square mile, denser than modern Manhattan. Except Manhattan has skyscrapers and elevators. Athens had 1- and 2-story mud brick buildings with walls so thin you could hear your neighbor's entire life story whether you wanted to or not. And speaking of neighbors, prepare for the noise. Ancient Athens never slept, and it never shut up. Craftsmen hammering metal, merchants shouting prices, animals making every sound in their repertoire, children screaming, adults arguing, religious processions drumming and chanting at random hours. One ancient writer complained that Athens was so loud you could not hear your own thoughts scream for mercy. There were no noise ordinances, no quiet hours. If your neighbor wanted to sacrifice a goat at 3 a.m. while singing hymns off-key, that was between him and the gods. The market, the agora, was worse. Imagine a modern farmer's market, except everyone's shouting, nobody's using deodorant, because it doesn't exist, live animals are everywhere, and hygiene is a concept that won't be invented for another 1,000 years. The smell hits you before you even see the market. Unwashed human bodies pressed together in the heat. Live fish rotting in the sun. Meat hanging from hooks, covered in flies, with no refrigeration. Olive oil that's gone rancid. Wine that's turned to vinegar. Leather being cured with urine. Incense burning at shrines, trying and failing to mask all the other smells. Your modern nose would probably just give up and stop working as an act of self-preservation. But you need to buy food for dinner, which means braving the chaos. The fishmonger's stall is a biological hazard. Fish laid out on stone slabs, eyes clouded, scales falling off, being prodded by every customer who walks by. There's no "you touch it, you buy it" rule. Everyone touches everything. The fishmonger swears it was caught this morning. It wasn't. The fish has been dead for at least 2 days, and the only reason it hasn't walked away is because it lacks legs. Vegetables are slightly better, but only slightly. They're grown in fields fertilized with human waste. That's where all those cesspits eventually get emptied, which means everything has been essentially marinated in aged sewage. Greeks didn't wash vegetables thoroughly because water was scarce. You bought it, you ate it, you hoped the cooking process killed whatever was trying to kill you. The price haggling is an Olympic sport. Everyone does it. The first price quoted is always insulted, countered with an equally insulting offer, and after 15 minutes of dramatic gestures and questioning each other's ancestry, you settle on something in the middle. This happens for every single item. Buying 5 things means an hour of negotiation. And if you're a woman, you're not even here. Respectable Athenian women didn't go to the market. They didn't go outside much at all. They stayed in the gynaikonitis, the women's quarters at the back of the house, and sent slaves or male relatives to do shopping. If a woman was seen shopping alone, her reputation was destroyed, and her husband's political career was probably over. Women's lives deserve their own horror documentary. Married at 14 to men in their 30s, expected to produce male heirs, confined to the house, and basically treated as property that could speak. They couldn't own property, couldn't vote, couldn't testify in court, and couldn't choose who they married. One Athenian philosopher wrote that women existed to bear children and manage the household stores, nothing more. That's not some fringe opinion. That was mainstream thought from the culture that supposedly invented democracy. But back to your day, which is only half over and somehow getting worse. 2 p.m. The heat is at its peak, and you're supposed to keep working. The Greeks had a saying, "Only mad dogs and Englishmen go out in the midday sun." Except they didn't know about Englishmen yet, so they just said mad dogs. But economic reality didn't care about heat stroke. You worked or you starved. Dehydration is setting in hard. You've been sweating for hours and you had maybe 1 cup of water at breakfast. The public fountains are your only option, and the water there isn't exactly pristine. It comes from springs outside the city, travels through clay pipes that haven't been cleaned since they were installed, and emerges into basins that everyone and their donkey drinks from. One study of ancient water systems found that parasites and bacteria thrived in these pipes. Drinking the water was basically a coin flip between hydration and dysentery. The smart move is wine. The alcohol content, low as it is, kills some bacteria. But drinking wine in scorching heat while doing manual labor is its own special kind of mistake. You're either dehydrated or drunk, possibly both, definitely suffering. Your hands are destroying themselves. The clay is rough, and the repetitive motion of throwing pots has given you what modern doctors would call severe tendinitis, and what ancient Greeks called the price of eating. Your back is screaming from hunching over the wheel. Your knees are shot from kneeling on stone all day, and the kiln still needs tending. Someone has to keep the fire at the right temperature, which means staying near an oven that's hotter than your body can safely tolerate. Potters regularly passed out from heat exhaustion. The successful ones woke up. The others became cautionary tales. Your fellow workers aren't helping. Everyone's miserable and taking it out on everyone else. Arguments erupt over nothing. A tool left in the wrong spot, a comment misheard. The heat makes people mean. And if you think the afternoon will bring relief, remember that line about things getting medieval before sunset? 4 p.m. You've somehow survived this long, but here's where ancient Greek culture shows its true colors. This is when the gymnasiums fill up. Not for exercise, though that happens, but for what ancient sources delicately call mentorship. Grown men pursuing teenage boys was not only legal, it was encouraged as part of education. The only rule was that the boy had to be old enough, which ancient sources define as showing the first signs of a beard. This isn't a scandal they hid. This was on their pottery, in their poetry, defended by their philosophers. Plato's Symposium is literally a dinner party where men compete to give the best speech about why their love of teenage boys is actually super philosophical. Modern people often gloss over this or pretend it was different than it sounds. It wasn't. Archaeological evidence, written records, and art all confirm it. The culture we're told to admire thought this was not only acceptable, but noble. You can't opt out of this culture either. It's not a feature, it's the foundation. And the gymnasiums where this happened? They were also where political education occurred, where military training happened, where social connections were made. Avoid them, and you avoid the entire path to success in Athenian society. The cognitive dissonance of learning philosophy in the same place as systematic abuse is just part of daily life. Nobody questions it. If you questioned it, you'd be the crazy one. Meanwhile, the women are still locked in their quarters, the slaves are still being worked to death, and democracy is still only for male citizens who own property, maybe 15% of the total population. That marble statue you imagined at the start? It was a lie to cover all of this. 6 p.m. Finally, dinner time. After this, you can collapse and pretend today didn't happen. If breakfast was depressing, dinner is a full existential crisis. You're eating the fish you bought this morning, which has now been sitting in the heat for several more hours. It's been cooked, which helps, but it still tastes like death had a disagreement with the ocean and lost. More of that barley bread. More of those impossible olives. Maybe some lentil soup that has the consistency of mud and the flavor of floor. The rich are having elaborate symposiums, drinking parties with food, music, and entertainment. You're having whatever survived the heat and didn't attract too many flies. Meals are eaten on the floor or on low couches if your family is doing well. No table, no chairs, just sitting or reclining while trying to scoop semi-solid food with your hands. Every surface is covered in a thin film of dust because everything in Athens is covered in dust. The wine comes out again, cut with water, but still more alcohol than hydration. After the day you've had, getting mildly drunk is less a choice and more a psychological necessity. Your family eats in silence or near silence. Conversation is exhausted by the heat and the labor. Someone might mention a neighbor's news or a price change in the market. Mostly, you all just focus on getting food down so you can stop thinking about being hungry. Children are eating too, but they're getting smaller portions. Not because adults are cruel, but because food is genuinely scarce and the workers need calories to keep working. Kids learn early that hunger is just another fact of life, like the heat or the smell or the lack of privacy. After dinner, there's maybe an hour before bed. What do you do with that hour? Not much. No books, you're probably illiterate anyway. Most Athenians couldn't read. Literacy was for the wealthy and educated, which you are not. No entertainment. Plays happen during festivals, not nightly. No hobbies. Your hands are too destroyed from work to do anything delicate. You might talk to neighbors in the street. You might repair something that broke during the day. You might just sit and stare at nothing, while your body slowly stops hurting enough to move. Some people visit temples in the evening to make offerings. Not elaborate ones, just a small piece of bread or a sip of wine poured on the ground. Praying that tomorrow is easier, knowing it won't be, doing it anyway because what else is there? And then you hear the screaming start a few streets over. Someone's in labor and it's not going well. Childbirth in ancient Athens had a maternal mortality rate of about 1 in 20. Infant mortality was even worse. Roughly 30% of children died before age 5. Women were expected to have multiple children because the assumption was that several wouldn't make it. There were no doctors for normal births, just midwives with their experience and hope that nothing went wrong. No pain medication, no sterilization, no understanding of infection. Women either survived or they didn't, and either way, they'd probably be pregnant again within a year because that was their duty. The screaming goes on for hours. Eventually it stops. You don't know if that's because the baby was born or because the mother died. You won't ask in the morning because it's not your business, and what comfort could you possibly offer anyway? The sound haunts the night. The sound and the heat and the smell and everything else that won't stop until you're unconscious. 9 p.m. Sunset has passed. Darkness brings its own problems. No street lights, no house lights, except maybe a single oil lamp that gives off more smoke than illumination. The streets are actively dangerous. Uneven stone, mystery fluids, no visibility. People who absolutely must go out at night hire torchbearers, usually enslaved children, to light the way. Crime spikes after dark. The city watch exists, but they're spread thin and generally incompetent. Drunk people stumble home and get robbed. People settle scores with knives in alleys. Women who get caught outside after dark face immediate suspicion about being prostitutes, because respectable women never left the house anyway. Your house gets locked from the inside. The single door is barred with a wooden plank. The window holes are covered with shutters to keep the worst of the night air out. Greeks believed night air carried disease. They were wrong about why, but right about the result, since standing water bred mosquitoes that did carry disease. Everyone retreats to their sleeping areas. In your one-room house, that means everyone's within arm's reach of everyone else. You hear every breath, every movement, every bodily function. The temperature has dropped from actively hostile to merely unpleasant. The wool blanket that was suffocating in the afternoon is now almost comfortable. You lie on the wooden platform that constitutes your bed. Your body is a catalog of pain. Your hands are cramping. Your back is screaming. Your feet are covered in blisters from the sandals. Your stomach is in knots from the food. Your lungs hurt from the smoke and dust. Your head is pounding from dehydration and cheap wine. But you survived. 24 hours in ancient Athens and you're still breathing. Would you do it again tomorrow? You will. You have to. Because this isn't a history lesson or a thought experiment. This is life. This is every single day for most people in the golden age of ancient Greece. The statues were marble. The reality was mud, waste, pain, hunger, heat, injustice, and the grinding certainty that tomorrow would be exactly the same as today. Now ask yourself, could you actually do this? Not as a thought experiment, but as your actual life. Every single day? Until you're 45 and you die from an infected tooth or bad water or just being worn out? The answer is no, you couldn't. Modern people are soft in ways we don't even realize. We've been protected from the baseline brutality of existence for so long that we've forgotten it was ever there. One day in ancient Athens would break you. The heat would cook you. The food would poison you. The labor would destroy your body. The culture would shatter your beliefs about humanity. The smell alone would probably send you running. Every marble column you've seen in a museum is hiding 1,000 gallons of human waste. Every philosophical text was written by men who thought enslaving people and abusing children was perfectly fine. Every democratic decision was made by the tiny fraction who had any rights at all. And the worst part? Athens was one of the better places to live in the ancient world. Other cities were worse. So the next time someone talks about the glory of ancient Greece, remember the urine mouthwash. Remember the shared sponge. Remember the children dying at a rate that would horrify modern countries. The past wasn't better. It was survival wearing a marble mask. You wouldn't last 24 hours. And that's fine. You're not supposed to. Now tell me in the comments, what part of this would break you first? The breakfast? The heat? The bathroom situation? Or the cultural stuff that we politely skipped over in history class? And should I cover ancient Rome next? Because trust me, it's somehow worse.